This is a sad day for Australian rugby after the Wallabies were obliterated on rugby's dance floor, 40 points to 6 by Wales at the Rugby World Cup. And all the pontification that is going to transpire on this platform and no doubt on every other media circus, I'm thinking Dave Rennie and what could have been for the Wallabies if they continued under his leadership and what he was developing with the gold. I'm a fan of Dave Rennie. I've watched Dave Rennie in New Zealand. I've seen him in different playing levels or at different playing levels and with different playing groups. I've seen how he's able to navigate through various groups of people and to develop and create and encourage a culture surrounding that leads to flourishing, not only of the individual but of the group. We saw the impact when he came into the Chiefs and what transpired as a result. Championships followed. I saw in a provincial level what he did with Manawatu, and a side that is not up at the elite of provincial rugby in New Zealand. Well, it hasn't been for probably a while, and there are various reasons why, but one that is passionate about its rugby and produces good rugby players, but they just tend to go to other places. Success. And success followed. I should finish that sentence first, maybe. Success followed. You could see there was something about what he was producing. And it's amazing how the difference a head coach can make. I think there's something about playing for the person. And I think people want to play for Dave Rennie. I think we saw at the end of last year, the Wallabies, even though they weren't necessarily winning, the building blocks were beginning to show, were beginning to expose themselves to the future. And there were just, the leaves were rustling about a potential rugby tomorrow. And I think about that now on the back of Wales, back of Fiji. I think about that looking forward to 2027, and I think about what would happen, what would have transpired if Dave Rennie was allowed the opportunity to keep building post-2022, into 2023, and then through to 2027. If there's anything we've learned in New Zealand is that change is not always the answer. If you know rugby and you know Rugby World Cups, you know that the All Blacks have struggled or had struggled for a decent period. And each Rugby World Cup failure was met with a swift broom and a new regime to come in until 2007, when the All Blacks were maybe even most expected to find success considering what they had been building. Players were being rested and reconditioned leading into the Super Rugby season of that year, and the All Blacks seemed like they were building a squad of half human, half alien type rugby players who had gifts and abilities that couldn't be matched now that they were being put through what all the other rugby players were not experiencing. We know what happened at Cardiff. We know what happened versus France. And that was our deepest descent. And what did we do as a result? Well, did our anger rise? Well, probably. But we sort of sobered up and realised you can't keep going. You can't keep doing these things. And the Wallabies have changed their coaches so regularly recently that, one, they should have stayed with Rennie. That's not just hindsight. Rennie was and remains a very good rugby coach. In fact, in my opinion, he is a better rugby coach than the All Blacks head coach. As a head coach, that's just my opinion. And I think that the results or the history would back that up. I think he's able to do things with a group that mark him out as someone you want to keep around if you have him in that role. And so I think the Wallabies now, what do? Do you go back to Dave? I think it's going to be pretty difficult in light of all what's transpired, and also in light of the leadership at Rugby Australia. And I think they bear a lot of responsibility because they initiated this change and now they are reaping the results. I understand probably what Eddie Jones was trying to do. He was thinking, well, the pull we can handle these guys. Let's get the young guys in and let's build to the future. But then you hear reports about the Japanese context and you wonder, what is actually going on there? And was he, if he was seeing the writing on the wall, maybe that's a better indication of who you want leading your squad than necessarily a CV. Because what the Wallabies need is someone who's going to get down and begin to do some really hard graft over a long-term period. Sadly, it doesn't seem like that will be Dave Rennie. And yet, today, this morning, on the back of Wallabies Wales, there is a sense of what could have been. Not that they would have necessarily won the Rugby World Cup or even made the final or anything necessarily like that. However, there would have been a tangible, not just sense, but there would be a tangible understanding and a tangible knowledge that the Wallabies were heading in a certain direction and that they were not just making up the numbers. After Wales, with Portugal to come for the Wallabies, it's hard not to ask certain questions and to think, surely Portugal can't do it. When you get to those questions, when you start like peeking at the unthinkable previously, you know how far the situation has diverted from where it should be. So, it's our time. This is the second video on this angle, and if you've watched the previous or you're about to watch the previous, then you'll know that these have been recorded in close proximity. And it's one that we shouldn't delight in the rugby death of what we easily view as the wicked in this part of the world. You know, our next door neighbours, and we couldn't win the Bledisloe for a time, and that's been in this, you know, for 20 years now or thereabouts. And Super Rugby and the challenges that are involved there. There's so much that is happening or needs to happen in Australia, and their health is very much tied to this region's health as well, and what decisions should be made heading forward. So I'm thinking of Dave Rennie at this time and what could have been. Dave Rennie will pop up surely in some shape or form into the future, whether it be at club, provincial or international level. And when he does, the side who is under him will experience the effects of a quality rugby coach. Sadly, it's not going to be the gold. And in my opinion, we're witnessing the effects, the negative effects, in contrast to the positive effects that was beginning to show themselves in 2022. What say you? I'm Johnny King.